And this here, so we know what we're approving. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? And discussion of the agenda. All in favor? Opposed? The agenda is approved. Your motion to approve the minutes. Regina Lawson. Any discussion of the minutes? All in favor? Opposed? The minutes are approved. All right. No unfinished business. So we've got new business, our legislative update. Dykema crew. Hello.
Hello. I don't know how big the crew is today. I think I'm happy there. I'm perfect timing. I was just going to say I'm happy to start on the federal side, and I know my state colleagues will jump into the rescue here and finish out. On the federal side, I think I'll be relatively brief. The president signed the one big beautiful bill on the 4th of July. I know everyone is aware of that. Just a couple of things to highlight out of that for your awareness, right? A lot of these cuts don't go into effect for a few years, in part because then you don't face the electoral consequences of the cuts that are included in the bill, but you still get to count the savings in the bill. So there's sort of a delay, and then there's often sort of efforts underway to unwind some of the cuts, and we see that on a pretty regular basis when Congress does these kinds of bills where they pick a few unpopular things and they use those to pay for tax cuts and things like that, and then there's a lot of blowback and they modify some of those cuts. I don't know if that will happen. I certainly would expect that to happen if there's a change in Congress, but the ones that I would highlight for you are around Medicaid, because a lot of the Medicaid cuts will impact school-age children and such, and so it puts a burden on local governments to sort of fill that void of some of the cuts that schools would have. The same applies with SNAP, where a lot of local food assistance programs, if the SNAP benefits aren't sufficient or they're cut back, it sort of puts the burden back on local governments to fill that void. We saw cuts around some of the clean energy programs that were established under the Inflation Reduction Act. And, you know, the president and his administration has targeted those from day one, things like the Environmental Justice Block Grants and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund program. And so the rescissions, rescinding the unobligated funds in those bills make it a little easier and less subject to a court challenge now that Congress has sort of changed those bills. One of the issues that got some of the most attention was around state and local income tax deductions. It originally had a $10,000 cap and it went up to $40,000, and they set a time frame on it. So it's for 5 years, and then it reverts back to the $10,000 cap. And so just worth watching. Some of the clean vehicle tax credits that were available for municipalities to use to electrify their fleets are going away on September 30th. Wind and solar production credits. The president, even while he's been in Scotland the last couple of days, has been quite vocal about his disdain for windmills and wind power, and so it's no surprise there that this bill does that. We also will see a pretty significant increase in funding for border security and immigration enforcement, and I don't think anyone knows exactly what that means just yet in terms of how those extra funds will be used, but I think there is sort of a fear/expectation that it will we will see expansions of some of these types of ICE raids that we've seen around more in border communities and large urban areas start to sort of expand and proliferate in different parts of the country with the new resources that they have to use. And so there's a whole host of other things. I don't want to sort of get too bogged down in it. There are obviously some pretty significant changes to higher education around student loans. There was changes to some of the other education programs that are sort of, you know, going to be of interest to residents in Ann Arbor. Things around like just reductions in the Department of Education and programs around expanding private school choice, I think maybe is the best way to describe that. In addition to sort of the one big beautiful bill, now that that is the work, and obviously I sort of glossed over it, but the major thing that that bill did was extend the tax credit or the tax cuts that were included in part of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And so that was sort of the basis for this bill. And then all the other things were primarily included to pay for it or to address other priorities that the president has made. The no tax on tips, reductions on senior income because they couldn't, it wasn't within the rules of reconciliation to provide no tax on Social Security payments. So they sort of came up with their own solution there. But with that bill, work on that bill being complete, it has sort of refocused everything to the federal appropriations process. And Mariah, I know that Kirby on our team talked a little bit about where that process stands when he talked with the group last time. The House left last week on Wednesday for their recess. They will not be back until after Labor Day. They did not complete work on nearly as many appropriations bills as they had hoped for. In fact, I think they've done 2 bills in the House floor. They had thought they would do all of them. The Senate is still here this week. They are sort of churning through some bills at the committee level. What we are watching in terms of the action is more on the big ticket side of things. They're trying to get an agreement amongst Democrats and Republicans to pass the appropriations bills in the Senate this week. That would include military construction, which is historically the least controversial of all 12 bills, and then the agriculture bill and the commerce, justice, science bill. For the most part, the bills have been negotiated on a bipartisan basis. There are some things in there Democrats don't like, but considering they're in the minority and that the minority in the House has had zero input on any of the bills, these bills would be sort of considered pretty bipartisan. And so what we are watching is to see whether or not they can actually complete work this week on them as an indicator of what's likely going to happen when they come back in September and actually have to pass real spending bills before the end of the fiscal year. If everything blows up this week and they're not able to get an agreement on these bills, which are much less controversial and seemingly more bipartisan, they only get more difficult from here. And so if this doesn't work, I would say that we are sort of barreling towards some type of shutdown or some type of standoff come the end of September. If these bills actually move and there's not a lot of drama and there's plenty of people on both sides of the aisle that support them, that doesn't eliminate the chance of a shutdown come the end of September, but it does actually sort of, at least in my opinion, sort of lessen the probability of that being the outcome at the end of September. So there's a lot to sort of discern from what happens this week. In regard to the specific community projects, we had the project with Congresswoman Dingell for the fire station. As we are learning every time this process goes through, if you are in the minority party of the House of Representatives, you do not do so well in the community project realm. And so the fire station was included, but our $5 million request got a whopping $250,000. As I look through the bill, that seems to be not Ann Arbor specific, but sort of the way that the pie was divvied up amongst Democrats. For instance, the Novi Public Safety Facility Construction Project requested $10 million. They got $250,000 also. And so I think there's a lot going on in these projects from the partisan side of things. Republicans don't really like to sort of promote them in the way Democrats did. Democrats sort of promoted them as a way of saying, you know, members of Congress know their districts best and they can direct resources to the greatest needs. And Republicans for so many years have sort of railed against earmarks as pork barrel spending and things like that, that there are a lot of Republicans that don't request projects. And so in order to make it so that there aren't more Democratic funding and earmarked projects, Republican projects get a lot more money to offset the fact that there are a lot more Democratic members who make requests than there are Republicans, even though Republicans have the majority. And so it's sort of a weird process, but that's ultimately what happened. And then when you get over to the Senate side, they play a little bit of games there as well, in that the Michigan senators, and this is, again, not specific to Senator Peters, Senator Slotkin, but historically has been kind of the case, they take a look at what projects were included in the House, and it's rare that there is a lot of overlap because they are trying to spread the pie out to as many Michigan entities and communities as possible. And so even if you are underfunded in the House, the fact that you make it in the bill often means that that box is checked for that project in the Senate, and they move on and take projects that didn't make it into the House bill so that they can then get more money back to Michigan and more entities, that's probably a better way to say that, can get money back in Michigan. And so there are really limited Senate projects in there, and they did not include the fire station in their list of projects. Let me stop there. I suspect that you all have some questions, and so rather than me keep talking, I'll try to answer whatever questions you might have.
Any questions?
I won't be disappointed if you don't have any, but I'll be happy to answer any that you do.
Corrections of disappointment.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you very much for that terrible news.
That's why I wanted to go first.
Oh, so does that mean we're gonna have good news on the state side?
Well, I don't have plans to deliver on the state side. You know, we're in a little, you know, we're just kind of in this lull with the budget process, as mentioned previously. You know, there was an effort earlier to try and focus and get the K-12 education portion of the budget done by the statutory July 1 deadline. That did not happen. You know, I think, and we were expecting the rest of the budget, which would include, you know, member requests to come in at the very final end of the appropriations process, that to, you know, really be the focus of the month of September, but in completing that work by the September 30th constitutional deadline. You know, there have been a few things, you know, taking place right now. Beginning last week, the House Labor and Economic Opportunity Department budget, that subcommittee, which typically is the place that member requests for projects are funded in the state budget. They began hearings on having members come up and present, House members at least, present on the request. And it's like 5-minute presentation. What it is really just seems to be a formality filling time. I don't know if it serves a whole lot of purpose beyond that, but they are doing presentations. They have hearings scheduled again this week. Thus far, it's been all of the Republican member requests, I believe. The House Dems and, we're working through members of the delegation in the House. Just they asked to confirm priorities, any concerns with conveying those. But they did share, rather than submit those to the appropriations chair as a request was, they were going to their leader and through Leader Puri to the appropriations chair kind of more collectively. So I think they're going to continue having the committee presentations. Again, I don't know more broadly what purpose it serves, but it is, they are doing that public presentation. So that's happening on the House side. Nothing of that nature on the Senate side. Don't expect that to occur. Typically, the decisions on what's included are made by caucus leaders when they reach agreement in budget negotiations, how much each caucus will have for member requests, and those are prioritized within the caucuses. So we'll see how that plays out, but just an interesting dynamic last week. The House was in session on Thursday. They had a handful of bills they were looking to report out. They were short some members, Republican members, so they thought they had commitments from some Democratic members to support the passage of these bills. That did not occur. It was a 7-hour session, and a lot of frustration from the speaker and how that played out, and some actions taken. I mean, there were some Republican House members who just weren't present for session, others that were in Lansing but refused to attend. So there were some retributions for that. On the Democratic side, House Democratic Vice Chair of Appropriations, LFS Farhat, was removed from the Appropriations Committee, so we're not sure how that plays out in kind of future budget negotiations and trying to get a budget done by the end of the year, but did have that. And then one of the other committee members who wasn't present, all kind of, I think the majority of bills pending in the committee, she chairs, have been referred to government ops, so taken away. So there's really very little business to conduct in that committee, going a different route. So, a lot of emotion in that coming out of last Thursday's session. We'll see how things play out. Not really expecting, again, anything on the budget to really start materializing till maybe later in August. Definitely, September should be a heavy focus when they're back in, regular session after the light summer schedule. So there are committees that are posting in the House, but again, other than these presentations, really not much focus on the budget itself. So that's what's happening on the budget front. So really not a lot of relevant kind of direct developments involving the city's request. So we're a little bit in a holding pattern. There are some policy bills moving, and I did, in our update for last week, legislative update, did flag a bill in a hearing coming up tomorrow that may be of interest to the city. That is, I think that one was dealing with, that's in the Transportation Committee, and dealing with the private roads, the ability for cities to maintain and improve those roads and do an assessment for property owners for those services. But that action also shared an update on the community solar legislation. that bill that was introduced in the House, one of the bills, one of several that were referred to Energy Committee, have since been moved to Government Ops. And, you know, that we're not expecting immediate action, but likely this fall on that bill. So happy to answer any questions. We expect to continue to see some legislative, kind of more policy activity. Still will be light on the budget front, again, till probably late August, early September. So happy to answer questions. So.
Any questions? We're a quiet bunch today. So when the testimony is given for our projects, it's just the rep doing it. There's no participation from the municipality. Is that right?
Yeah, and just as a reminder, on the House, the request that was made by the Ann Arbor delegation was on behalf of the DDA for the bollards. That, you know, oftentimes it's just the legislators, but on occasion they'll have someone come in to help, you know, they can have someone join them. I don't believe that would be the city proper in that case, but I think the delegation is probably comfortable enough to do that. I haven't heard of any dates yet, date and time that they might be scheduled on that request, but continuing, you know, to stay in communication there and just see it's a fluid, seems to be a bit of a fluid process, and not only just in the scheduling, but even day of with hearings and what all is taken up on those different dates. So, yeah, we'll share more, but I don't know, it doesn't seem it would be the city proper that would provide any testimony, joint testimony with the House Ann Arbor members if needed, just to clarify on that. And that was just the nature of the request because it came from the DDA, and I think we discussed the purposes there.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to closed session. Do we have a closed session today?
Yes, please. I would like to request a closed session under MCL 15.268, Section 81H, to discuss a confidential memo provided to the committee on May 14, 2025.
Can I get a motion to move this closed session? Malik, Councilman Malik, Regina. All those in favor? Roll call. Do we have to do roll call? Okay.
No, you don't.
No, we don't. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? We are in closed session. Information / upcoming business. Right, seeing none. Public comment. Do we have any attendees? Okay. If you'd like to make a comment, you can press *9. Being none, public comment is closed. Can I get a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.